Hello, everyone. Brad Logan, welcome into the Believe in Ole Miss podcast. Joined now by Zach Moreth of the Rebel Walk. He's done a great job covering Ole Miss athletics. We're going to talk about two specific sports today that he's very close to. That's the Ole Miss men's basketball program that just wrapped up their season against Michigan State in the Sweet 16. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Ole Miss football program. He's been very close to spring practice, the Lane Kiffin pressers, and we'll just kind of gauge some interest from Zach about what he feels is upcoming for the Ole Miss football program. Zach, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate all your hard work.
Yeah, Brad, it's the feeling's definitely mutual. You do an amazing job on Twitter, so super grateful to be on the show here this morning.
Um, Thank you. Let's talk about Ole Miss men's basketball. I know you follow this program very closely. It's night and day from where it was a couple of years ago, in large part because of Chris Beard. Kind of your overall thoughts about the season under head coach Chris Beard.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to tell me that this team was to go to the Sweet 16 before the season, I'd probably tell you that you were crazy. I thought we were a little bit undersized. I didn't know if we had the experience in March to take it to that second weekend. But not only did we do that, but we also did some incredible things along during the regular season as well. And as a student, going to these games against Tennessee, watching us go on the road in Tuscaloosa and get a big win. And then going to Nashville and being there in person and watching Sean Padula hit that game winner against Arkansas, to me, it was a season just filled with incredible memories. So that's a credit to Chris Beard on him really maximizing the role of every single player. You want to break it down statistically. You got six guys scoring in double digits, and that's how the team was built, and that's what led them to that Sweet 16 run. And hey, if you make a couple more threes or the whistle goes your way a few more times against Michigan State, you could be looking at a potential Elite Eight team in Ole Miss. So I think the ceiling really is super high when you want to look forward as to what's next for Chris Beard and the staff. And I'm excited to just be a part of it and be at Ole Miss during this time to be able to witness it.
Digging through the stats at the end of the year, what really jumped out to me was the distribution of the basketball on the offensive end. And, I think, Zach, at the end of the day, I think, what, five or six players ended the year in double figure scoring. And that, to me, that is the culmination of buying into Chris Beard and what he was selling. And I think it was really neat to watch this team kind of evolve throughout the year. And I think in large part, it kind of began with the win in Tuscaloosa. I think it felt like to me the team started buying into what Chris Beard was selling and buying into itself and kind of becoming a team after that win in Tuscaloosa.
100%, Brad. And there were a couple games before, Ole Miss took down BYU, really, beat the crap out of Louisville on their home court. But they lost to Purdue. So that was kind of the first test. And I want to say they were like plus 12 and a half for all the betting listeners out there. And I was like, whoa, like that's a little crazy. And not only did they cover, but they won by double digits there. And like you said, Chris Beard, all he did was distribute the basketball to different players, and he really started to figure out not only at Bama by getting the ball to Malik Dia that game, but who's the best player in this game that we can get the ball to. So for Tennessee, that was Jamin Brakefield, and then that last shot against Arkansas, obviously it was Sean Padula. But looking across the board here, just compared to last year, there were almost had a 3-point increase per game, two less turnovers per game, and more steals per game. So this was more of that physical Chris Beard team that we saw. But unlike previous years that he's coached, he coached Jarrett Culver, who was supposed to be an NBA star at Texas Tech. Obviously, hasn't panned out that way in his NBA career, but he had to take a new approach into coaching. They didn't have that number one guy. And credit to you, they like you said, Brad, they did an incredible job distributing the ball, and that's what made this team so successful. So I'm curious moving forward if they're going to go get that guy, that elite scorer out of the portal. Maybe Malik Dia turns into that guy if he ends up staying, or if it's going to be another year where, hey, whoever's hot on any given night, we got to give them the ball, and hopefully they can go get us this win.
You look at the world of college basketball, and in years past, you had Kentucky with John Calipari. You had so many other programs outside of like Kentucky. Maybe I'm trying to think of another team that's just complete overhaul every year. Now it's so many teams, you really just you can't even count them. And Ole Miss has become one of those teams now that where it's a complete overhaul. The women's basketball program under Coach Joe, I think they're last I counted, there's a chance that she may have to get 9 players out of the portal.
Right.
So, looking at where the world is in college basketball and with Chris Beard at Ole Miss, is this a situation you think Ole Miss can sustain success under Chris Beard having to have such an overhaul that's coming?
I honestly do, Brad, and you see it in sports beyond foot or basketball. You see it in sports like football as well. Lane Kiffin does an incredible job at it, another Ole Miss coach. But that's kind of the world of college athletics. There was an interview with Rick Pitino, the St. John's coach, and he said they're not recruiting a single freshman out of this upcoming class. They're hitting everyone from the transfer portal for their upcoming roster because they want experience. And you look at the guys on Ole Miss. It was unfortunate that John Bull entered the transfer portal yesterday, but you could allocate that money and go get yourself a center or another forward who's proven that they can compete at the Division One level, proven they can defend, rebound, and score. And I thought that was a missing piece that Ole Miss really lacked during that March Madness run is having that dominant big man that they can get the ball to, who can score in the post or go get a rebound at will. So the transfer portal is the way to go, especially, when you want to get guys who have veteran experience and a lot of games played in college. But at the same time, I think Ole Miss is doing a nice job. Chris Beard specifically, it's still getting those freshmen. You got Patton Pinkins and Tyler Jordan, two highly touted four stars coming in who have the potential to make an impact their freshman year, but also stay, maybe 1, 2, or 3 years and really solidify themselves as Ole Miss basketball players.
We'll see how things flesh out. I know the elephant in the room right now is that Chris Beard's name is being mentioned for multiple jobs. I know that you guys over at the Rebel Walk are covering that. We're trying to do the same
Right.
thing over at our side as well. Looking at Chris Beard, and here's the thing at Ole Miss, the Ole Miss men's basketball program, if you have success, people are going to come after you. And so I think that's just kind of where it is right now with Ole Miss. But from the conversations I've had, Ole Miss is putting a really nice package in place. They already have a package in place right now with Chris Beard, paying him in excess of $5 million. I would expect the allocation. This is pure speculation. The NIL budget for Ole Miss men's basketball, I would expect to go up with the recent success. I don't know that for a fact. At the end of the day, success in Ole Miss men's basketball, which means you're going to have to fight off detractors. You'd much rather be in that position than the latter. If you're Ole Miss and if you're Chris Beard, we already know that they're recruiting really hard in the portal. You may mention a couple of names. What is the ceiling for this team? You follow this team all year long. You heard from Chris Beard in all the press conferences. What, in your opinion, is the ceiling for this team over the next couple of years?
Yeah, Brad. So I think if you look at last offseason, yes, Chris Beard did an incredible job in the transfer portal, brought in Dia, Padula, and still maintained Matt Morrell, Brakefield, Klafke, who was kind of on the team with the year before. But he did a good job establishing that roster. But what fans have to remember is he did that after a 20-win season where they ended, quite honestly, poorly. They didn't make March Madness. They didn't compete well at the end of the year. They didn't do well in the SEC tournament. So he wasn't getting, in my opinion, the proper funding to make that team, and he still managed to do it. So now you go on a Sweet 16 run. I think you're going to see an increase in fan engagement, donors, and overall passion from the coaching staff. Like, look, we did that with a team that, we weren't even really, we didn't have the proper funds for, in my opinion. I do think they're going to have an influx to work with, and you're going to see it in the transfer portal. And that starts with a guy named Pop Isaacs, who he's been predicted by almost every website to commit to Ole Miss, but he's a 6'2" point guard, kind of your sharpshooter who's going to seemingly replace Sean Padula. Carter Welling's another name to look out for. He's a 6'10" forward slash center who can not only defend, but he can shoot the basketball, score, and he's a good rebounder. And the last guy I'll touch on is Corey Chest. He's an LSU transfer, a redshirt freshman, 6'8", 220. Not the best stats, but look, anytime you can get a guy who has SEC experience and he's 6'8", 220 pounds, that's going to fit in perfectly with the Chris Beard offense and defense. So to me, the sky's the limit to answer your question, Brett. I wouldn't be surprised if Ole Miss makes a trip to the Final Four in the next couple of years here. You saw what he did with last year's roster. Now Chris Beard can finally assemble some guys of his own, along with some of the freshmen that he's personally recruited. And to me, that's a scary sight for college basketball.
what I found interesting with Coach Beard is whether it be I was in the room or listening to the feed of the press conference, is that he always made mention that it's an 18 round fight and each game is independent of its own. And then if you listen to his demeanor, with the exception of the last game where he become emotional against Michigan State, he was right here. He never got too high, he never got too low. Even on the road of the big win at Alabama, you wouldn't know listening at the press conference if the Rebels won or not. In fact, sometimes it was hard to decipher, and I may mention in the press conference when I was there against Tennessee, it was just really weird how you couldn't tell if he was too high or too low. And I think the team fed off that. And I think it became much easier for them to flush the losses and to appreciate the wins and move on week to week because they had some tough losses. You look at the
Oh
game against
yeah.
A&M, led the entire game. You look at the game against Mississippi State, going down, Matt Morrell to dunk the basketball in Starkville, gets blocked. Mississippi State takes it to OT off the Riley Cool three, and then Ole Miss loses it. So they had some really tough losses, but they had some really good wins too. And I think that's really just about the world of Chris Beard. I think the team fed off that.
Yeah, you really nailed it there, Brad. Just his personality. I really think when he's talking to the media, he is portraying his real personality and being as real with us as possible. And you're damn right. It's like a straight line. It's always confident and it's never surprised. He went on after beating Arkansas in the SEC tournament, and he's like, I know, the media doesn't believe this, but we're actually here to win this tournament because he thinks his Ole Miss team can do that. So you pair together a transfer class that he's going to put together, these freshmen, Dia and Klafke coming back. I think this team's going to be really special next year. And I think it starts with Beard's attitude and his ability to coach. After that press conference against Arkansas and Nashville, there were national media reporters who were coming up to me like they're like, "Yeah, that Beard presser was really good." And then I sat in and listened to Calipari, and John Calipari is more of an emotional guy. I know they had lost that game, but it was very different from what you hear from Chris Beard after when he loses games. So his confidence and his ability to respond and get his team up for every single game is special. And it's definitely something Ole Miss fans should not be taking for granted while he's here in Oxford.
Yeah, it's just an incredible basketball coach. And I know Ole Miss fans are hoping that Walker Jones, athletic director Keith Carter, and then someone that's very, very vital to the I guess you could say holding on to coaches, hiring coaches, and that's Dr. Glenn Boyce. So I know that a lot of stuff's going on behind the scenes to make sure that Ole Miss head coach Chris Beard is here for the foreseeable future. Let's jump over to football. I know Zach, you were at practice the other day. We'll talk about the press conference and kind of get a little more insight about what Lane Kiffin said and some concerns. I think that Lane talked about, and you even posted on Twitter/X about that. But I want to start with the post of Ben Garrett of On3 Sports showing the pass of TJ Maddox. It was a bomb, and he looks really good. And I think that's good news for Ole Miss. We know that Austin Simmons is probably going to be the starting quarterback. But I think it's really good to know that there is a very good backup that can come in and spell Simmons if he needs to, and that's AJ Maddox. I've thought all along, you look at the spring game last year, I know there were a lot of pomp and circumstance with hot dogs and dunk contests. But at the end of the day, AJ Maddox was throwing the ball really well, and I think that bodes well for Ole Miss.
AJ Maddox is going to be an absolute beast when his time comes here at Ole Miss, Brad. And I actually watched him play. I think it was a state championship game when Oak Grove played, and it was in Vaught Hemingway Stadium. And I was like, man, it's unfortunate that this kid's committed to A&M because he's got a gun for an arm, but he runs all over the place. I was like, it was like watching Lamar Jackson on a high school football field. So when his time's come, his time is here. You better believe he's going to be ready for it. He got to watch and sit under the leadership of Jackson Dart, and now he gets to play with the NFL future first round pick, Austin Simmons, who's looked phenomenal. But Maddox, this dude can play, Brad, and he can sling the ball down the field. You guys see it on Twitter, but it really is impressive for a guy who's a true sophomore.
Let's talk about Austin Simmons. I know Lane talked about him in the press conference. What were your overall thoughts from Lane discussing Austin Simmons and his progress throughout the spring?
This isn't a disrespect to Jackson Dart. I think he did some incredible things. He obviously holds several Ole Miss records. But it is nice to see a different level of talent that hasn't come to Ole Miss in a long time. I don't think there's any question that Austin's arm strength and overall IQ of the game is different than a lot of quarterbacks in the SEC. I mean, you saw it against Georgia, right? He comes in for one drive, he's tearing up the Georgia defense somehow. And then feels like every other time he came in the game, when Ole Miss was blowing someone out, he's throwing a 60-yard bomb down the field for a completion. So Austin's special. And one of the aspects of his game that Lane's talked about is his rushing ability. And not only does Austin have quick, good feet, but he's able to slide out of the pocket. He's able to run. Oh, and guess what, Brad? He knows how to slide. Austin's baseball background allows him to slide without getting mauled. And Lane said it in the press conference yesterday. He's like, yeah, Austin actually doesn't run like a running back. But that was the style of Dart, man. He's gritty. It's give me the ball. It's get in my face. I'm going to try and run you over. But I think Austin saw that and probably wants to protect himself a little more. He's not as thick as Jackson Dart. You look at him, he's a smaller guy in terms of mass, but rushing, being able to slide out of the pocket and throw the ball anywhere on the field, I think you're going to see this offense go absolutely berserk this fall.
And let's stay on the offensive side of the ball. Kawhi Lacey and Logan Diggs getting the lion's share of the carries at running back. In your opinion, is there anyone else we need to be looking for in the running back room right now?
Dominique Thomas is a name. I know we saw him a little bit last year, but he's definitely up there and getting some repetitions. I think he's a good pass blocker as well. And then Shakai Mills Knight is not on campus, but shout out Shakai. He's my absolute good friend. He's an amazing person. Oh, and guess what? He's an even better football player somehow. This kid's an absolute stud. Really big kid, has the ability to explode. He's very shifty, and he can run through a guy's face. It's that simple. So he'll be on campus this May or June, and I think you're going to see, like Ole Miss did with Quinshon Judkins, they're not afraid to play freshman running backs who have the size and capability to compete in the SEC, and he will definitely be getting some snaps this fall as well.
Um, have you seen Logan Diggs? Does he look pretty good after the injury, in your opinion?
I think Logan looks great, not only physically, but his ability to move. They posted a clip on Twitter X yesterday. I think he spun off a tackle and ran it in for a touchdown. So he will definitely be good to go when the fall comes around.
I know speaking of spinning out, we saw Coach Pete Golding spinning out of a tackle that Michael Cass of the Daily Journal posted. I admit I chuckled quite a bit at that. So
I
uh,
didn't know Pete could move like
that's the
that.
move. Yeah. Pete played defensive back at Delta State. Um,
Oh,
he did. He was
I
a
didn't know he
very
played TV.
He did. He was a very good. I think he played free safety, and
Wow.
he was a fantastic football player. So he's still got some moves. It's age has maybe gotten a little bit of the better
Yeah.
of the defensive coordinator. Offensive line, a couple of injuries, offseason injuries. I say injuries, surgeries for Jaden Williams and Micah Pettis. Um, Question marks, I think, in the offensive line. They really never had a cohesive unit until maybe the last couple of games. It just kind of rotated people in and out. What are your overall thoughts on the offensive line right now as spring is upon us?
There's noticeably more depth. I'll start with that. Guys like Percy Lewis, who transferred over, he's getting some playing time. And then Delano Townsend, PJ Wilkins, and Patrick Kudas, who are all transfers, are getting a lot of time on that offensive line. Jaden Williams looks a little bit smaller. I know he's had some health problems throughout his years at Ole Miss, but I would definitely anticipate him to be good to go to play tackle this fall. Diego Pounds is working through some stuff, but he will probably start a tackle. We've seen Bryson Sanders, a guy who committed to Ole Miss out of high school, taking a lot of reps at that starting center spot. And then the final thing, which is really exciting for me to even talk about, is James Craig, who worked with the 2019 LSU offensive line and has spent, decades in the NFL. His daughter happens to go to Ole Miss, so he's now on the staff. With Joe Judge's son is at Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin's daughter's at Ole Miss. So these kids are really bringing together the football staff. But James Craig is just an incredible guy, and I think he's going to help John Garrison, fix the problems from last year and really piece this line together to have a much better fall here in 2025.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that. Diego Pounds, not Micah Pettis. I apologize. I was wrong.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And also, I appreciate you bringing up James Craig because he's someone that, if memory serves, a tremendous career in the league and has a great amount of experience in the league. that can only do what Joe Judge is doing, is preparing these skill players now, preparing these offensive linemen for the next level. I think I'd love your thoughts. The maybe the most talented room in the entire team is the tight end room, with Daquan Wright coming back, Luke Haas transferring in from Arkansas. It's a really good tight end room, and I'll be excited to see how much 12 personnel we see this fall.
To your point, Brad, we saw it a little bit yesterday. We saw Luke Has lining up in the backfield, and this kid, man, he's a thick dude. Like I would not want to be blocked by Luke Has. And then on the flip side, you got Daquan Wright, who looked like uh Calvin Johnson sometimes last year. Some of the catches he was making were unbelievable. So for him to be able to take that next step forward is going to be special. To pair that with the blocking ability of Luke Haas, I think Ole Miss has a great mix and match. And it seems like they have a good bond as well. When Wright was talking about him in the presser yesterday, it was all smiles and laughter on his relationship with Haas. So, it's a good job of them collaborating. And for them to be able to do that with this insane wide receiver room, it's going to be, I just think, another incredible fall and a great job establishing this roster by Kiffin and the offensive staff.
Defensively, I know we talk a lot about how many players are going to the league, how many players participated in pro days, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. The question mark heading into the season, I think, is overshadowed by anything is the defensive line. I know Cam Franklin is one that we'll be looking for, but after that, it's backups and it's new guys, Akilo Stone, Jamarian Brown. What do you think about that defensive front? Is there any way they can, bottle up what they had last year and have just some semblance of a defensive front that was so good last year for Ole Miss?
Yeah, and the unfortunate thing is, I don't think that defensive line will ever get replicated at Ole Miss. You're looking at a D line filled with first and second round NFL draft picks. It was special, and we saw it, in every single game against Georgia. They really won Ole Miss that game and put it to bed in the second half. But I think this defensive line does have a lot of upside. And for next year, I think they'll be pretty close to where we were at last year in terms of NFL talent. You got Will Eccles, who's turned into an absolute beast. Cam Franklin. I really like what I'm seeing from Deshaun Womack, the LSU transfer. He looks like an absolute animal out there. Xavier Harris is, as we know, he's 6'8". He's an eyesore on the field because he is such a problem in the run game. Jam Brown, you mentioned the name, but he looks good out there. He looks very physical, takes up a lot of space. And then I wouldn't be surprised if freshman Andrew Maddox, the brother of AJ Maddox, ends up getting some tackle reps. He's very physical. His dad, I believe, played in the NFL, so he's going to be prepared. And he's going to be a guy who's going to continue to take those steps. And if he's not ready this year, you better believe he's going to be like a Will Eccles or Cam Franklin next year, who's making noise as a sophomore. So I think the potential's there. Don't be surprised if they grab another edge rusher or defensive tackle out of the portal here in late April. But definitely, it's tough to compare and discuss, the level of talent compared to last year. But ton of upside, no doubt here on the defensive line room.
An incredible stalwart for Ole Miss last year is gone to the NFL. That's Chris Hall. There was a little bit of possibility that he might return, but I feel like he's just too good and too much to risk by staying around as talented as he is. He's headed off the NFL. What are your thoughts on the linebacker room and who can kind of fill some really big shoes left by Chris Hall? We know Suntarin Perkins is back. That's good. They kind of move him around. Princewell, Emmanuel, and I know they're thinking about maybe moving him around. What do you think about the linebacker position right now?
It definitely starts with TJ Daugherty and his leadership presence because it was kind of strange, but last year it was Daugherty, the one who was getting the calls through the headset from Pete Golding. It wasn't Pooh Paul. And I don't think Pooh started performing at that level until the games took off. And then obviously they realized, hey, he could probably handle the call set as well. But TJ has that experience. He's going to be the leader in that room. He's battling through some injuries right now, really doesn't have the pads on, so we're not seeing a whole lot. But we've seen Todd Chambers, who was the Missouri State transfer, Andrew Jones from Grambling, Jaden Yates from Marshall, and then Tyler Banks, a guy who's been at Ole Miss forever. He looks like an absolute monster out there. He looks a little quicker and ready to go. I think he's been waiting to finally get some reps. Don't know if he'll have that starting spot come the fall. This could be another position that they attack the portal with a little. But there's guys to play. There's no doubt that they're going to figure out that rotation. And then you pair in Prince Will and Suntarian Perkins, who can mix and match on those outside jack or edge rusher spots. I think the linebacker room is going to basically pick up where it left off, if I had to guess, Brad.
I want to, before we move to the secondary, Lane made mention that I think it was Lane, correct me if I'm wrong, made mention that Prince Well and Monmielen, the only thing he really shared with his brother is a similar name. I'd love for you to kind of tell everybody, what are your overall thoughts on Prince Well and Monmielen? Where do you think we'll see him next year? Will it be more of an edge rusher? Will it be kind of a stand-up defensive end? Will it be kind of a hybrid linebacker? I think everyone's kind of fascinated to see where they'll see him on the field.
I think Prince Will is definitely your hybrid linebacker guy. He works with the same coach who was really high on Princely, and that's the analyst Lou Spanos. But at the end of the day, Prince Will is a smaller guy. I think he's about maybe 15 or 20 pounds less than Princely. He's got a little more length, but because of that, I don't know how well he would play off the edge, especially considering you're probably going to have Perkins, Cam Franklin, Deshaun Womack up there for quite a bit of the year. Now, there's no doubt that Uman Mielen's going to be a beast on different rush packages, but he's also going to play a lot in coverage. So his ability to be a jack of all trades is really going to benefit Pete Golding. It's the exact type of guys he likes to recruit, and I'm very high on him for not only this fall, but I think he'll stick around and have that princely type senior year here in 2026.
Now let's get to the position to where I think everyone is really concerned about. I think Lane Kiffin's probably concerned, along with Pete Golding. Uh, a lot of questions to get to. Let's start with this. Your overall thoughts after watching what limited amount of practice you've been able to see about the secondary.
They're outmatched right now, Brad, and I want to start by focusing on that they're facing a wide receiver room full of guys who transferred from Oklahoma State, Penn State, really a really good receiver who's super fast from Wake Forest, Caden Lee. We talked about these tight ends. Like this is going to be one of the best wide receiving rooms in the SEC. So it's tough to deal with that on a daily basis, but you have to get used to it, right? You're going to be facing quarterbacks, DJ Lagway, Lenore Sellers. I'm definitely missing a couple here. Garrett Nussmeier, guys who can sling it. So there's no question they need to get active in the portal here. But we've seen the Washington State transfer, Kapina Gushigan. I'm hoping I'm saying that correctly. The LSU transfer, Sage Ryan. They're both getting some work in those safety spots. And then TJ Banks and Cedric Beavers, two guys who've been at Ole Miss for a little bit here, are getting those spots at the 1 and 2 corners. And it's difficult. You know, there are guys who don't have SEC experience, who really don't have playing experience. And now they're going against, just some absolute ballers like Harrison Wallace, Dejon Stribling, Caleb Odom, just absolute dogs over there at the wide receiver spot. So it's tough, it's difficult, and you pair that with the scheme of Pete Golding, which is seemingly impossible to figure out unless you really sit down and look at it. I think things are spinning and going fast for the DB room right now, which isn't what you want to happen when you're going against an offense that is absolutely insane and a guy in Austin Simmons who could lead the SEC in yards passing. So I want to give, the offense credit, but there's no doubt that the defense needs to take the necessary steps forward to get them prepared for when they go against high level quarterbacks and wide receiver rooms. So definitely going to have to make some moves here in the transfer portal. But yeah, Brad, I mean, it seems, in that first year Golding was here is probably the weak spot of that defense. And unfortunately, might be the case similar here when the fall starts in 2025.
Yeah, we'll finish up on the offensive side of the ball. Caden Lee has just will go down in history as one of the most solid, I think, wide receivers in the history of the program. He came in and just kind of figured out a way to get on the field, and it was fun to watch him because he just made so many plays that they couldn't take him off the field. Obviously, you've got Jordan Watkins has moved on. Juice Wells has moved on. Who are some names? You mentioned Stribling, the transfer, has looked pretty good. Caden Lee obviously is going to be the anchor of the wide receiver room. How's it look so far?
It's dynamic. Caden Lee, not only is his relationship with Austin Simmons special, I'm pretty sure they're best friends off the field, but he's definitely put on 5 or 10 pounds here. He looks a little thicker and a little more prepared to take those hits because that boy was getting slapped around here and there a couple times in SEC play because he's a smaller guy, right? He's that slot, quicker receiver. But Harrison Walsh from Penn State stands out. Great hands, physical route runner. He's going to go up there and catch the football. Caleb Odom from Alabama. He seems like your guy if, hey, it's 4th and 20 and you need a guy to run down the field and absolutely moss a defensive back. You're throwing the ball to Caleb Odom. Deuce Alexander from Wake Forest, another guy who's very, very quick. He's going to be that replacement type guy for Jordan Watkins, along with Caden Lee, obviously. And not to mention, Caleb Cunningham, the best recruit out of Mississippi, isn't even on campus yet. Like, this wide receiver room, I know it sounds crazy to say. I think they're going to produce more than last year. We saw when Trey Harris was in the game, the offense was basically ran through him. And I don't think there's another Trey Harris type player. You could argue Stribling's going to get to that level, but they're going to be distributing the ball to every player who is available and open. And you have guys who are going to get open, guys who are going to make contested catches. You look at that tight end room, they're going to be all over the middle of the field. So, Sky, I mean, the ceiling is so damn high for Austin Simmons. I'm really looking forward to watching this offense get to work here in the fall.
He's Zach Moreth. Does a great job covering Ole Miss athletics across the board for the Rebel Walk. You can follow him on Twitter/X at Zach Moreth. And of course, at the Rebel Walk, Evie Van Pelt and her entire team do wonderful job covering this Ole Miss athletic program. Zach, thanks very much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you down the road.
I appreciate you, Brad. Thank you guys for listening.